left on the majority side in morning business?
19 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, we're now approaching the 10th anniversary of 9/11. As with countless others who experienced all that happened that day, recounting 9/11, assessing its implications on our nation is both a profound and deeply personal undertaking. I'll never forget the moments when I learned what happened. I was in the House gym. I was a senator then, but still went to the House gym. And there's a little TV on top of the lockers, and somebody pointed out, one of our colleagues who was then in the House with me from the other side of the aisle, pointed out, he said, "Look on the TV, it looks like a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center." We all gathered round, watched the TV, and came to the conclusion it was probably a little turboplane that had lost its way. We kept our eye on the TV, and then, of course, we saw the second plane hit the second tower, and we knew that it was not just an accident. I quickly dressed, showered, rushed, get into my car, and as I was driving quickly to my office, I saw another plane fly in low over the Potomac, and then I saw a big plume of smoke, and obviously that was the plane aimed at the Pentagon, and said to myself, World War III has started. I quickly called my wife, and our first concern was our daughter, who went to high school just a few blocks from the World Trade Center. We didn't know what would happen. The towers were on fire. We actually took out the almanac to see how high the Trade Center was and see if it fell in the direction of her school, if it would hit it. For 5 hours, we couldn't find Jessica. They had successfully evacuated the school, but because they had shut down the elevators in the school, they all had to walk down the stairs. She was on the 9th floor, and being Jessica, she escorted an elderly teacher who couldn't get down very quickly and lost her way from the group. Of course, praise God, we found her, and that was just the beginning of the anguish. The next day, Senator Clinton and I flew to New York. I'll never forget that scene. I think of it just about every day. The smell of death was in the air. The towers were still burning. People were rushing to the towers, firefighters, police officers, construction workers, to see if they could find the missing. And the most poignant scene that I think of all the time, Mr. President, is hundreds, literally hundreds of people, average folks of every background, holding up little signs. Have you seen my daughter, Sally, with a picture? Have you seen my husband, Bill? Because at that point, we didn't know who was lost and who wasn't. Well, it was a very rough time, and we think of it every day. We know what happened, and it is something that, of course, will remain in our minds for the rest of our lives, but of course not close to those who lost loved ones, either during the horrible conflagration or in years later. Well, now is time. It's the 10th anniversary, so it's a good time to take stock on the effect of the trauma and what it means both locally and nationally. Obviously, every one of us in America was scared and shocked and traumatized and horrified and angry and heartbroken. At first, we didn't know what happened. Then, as we learned who had attacked us and why, we had to confront a crisis we didn't feel prepared for. It was an experience we, as New Yorkers and Americans, were not used to at all. We felt so vulnerable. Were we going to be the subject of attack after attack from stateless, nihilistic enemies that we poorly understood? And we were even more prepared to fight. There was this doctrine of asymmetrical power. Small groups living even in caves were empowered by technology and could do damage to us, horrible damage, that we couldn't stop. Could it be that our vast military was a poor match for a small group of technologically savvy extremists bent on mass murder and mayhem, directed from half a world away? It seemed more likely, certain even, that attack after attack would come our way from a small group willing to use any tactic, from a box cutter and a plane loaded to weapons of mass destruction focused solely on massive loss of life and damage to the economy, not to mention to our collective psyche, and confidence as a people. It was also a hammer blow to the great city in which I live and have lived my whole life. It raised the question of its future. People everywhere were writing the obituaries on downtown Manhattan. People in businesses were leaving or seriously contemplating leaving. Being diffuse was the answer, not concentrated. Some wrote that maybe now densely populated, diverse cities like New York would no longer have a future. A permanent exodus seemed imminent. Downtown New York would become a ghost town. Who would work here again? Who would want to live here? Who would dine or see a show here? What global firm would locate thousands of jobs here? It was not an exaggeration to say that New York's days as the leading city on the global stage seemed like they could be over. But our response was immediate, proactive, unified, and successful. In the days, weeks, and first months after 9/11, America as a society, and by extension its political system, came together and behaved in a remarkable way. New Yorkers, as always, did the same. There immediately developed a sense of shared sacrifice and common purpose that gave rise to a torrent of actions in the private and public spheres. Amongst the American people, there was an unprecedented outpouring of voluntary help, a tradition deeply rooted in our American tradition of community service and voluntary action, noted by observers as far back as Alexis de Tocqueville, who in the earliest days of our republic observed that Americans of all ages, all conditions, all minds constantly unite. Not only do they have a commercial and industrial associations in which they take part, he wrote, but they have thousands of other kinds, religious, moral, grave, feudal, very general and very particular, immense and very small. Fueled by this reaction, Mr. President, our government went to work immediately at all levels, collaborating on the federal, state, and local levels. In Washington, D.C., the policy response to the situation at hand was remarkable for its productivity, its extraordinary speed, and overall, the positive impacts it made in both the short term and long term. All of what we did was far from perfect. But when our government is able to be this nimble, responsive, and effective, it is worth asking what the elements of its success were so that we might think about how it can apply to future situations, like the one we are in now. If I were to characterize our policy actions post 9/11, I would say they were non-ideological, practical. Partisanship was subdued. The actions were collaborative, not vituperative. They were balanced and fair. They were bold and decisive. And they were both short and long-term focused. Let's take a quick look at each. We were non-ideological. Post 9/11, we were driven primarily by facts, not primarily by ideology. We asked, what did the situation require and how might we best execute that? Not how can I exploit this situation to further my worldview or political agenda or pecuniary self-interest. We didn't have a debate about the nature of government and whether or how we ought to support disaster victims or the need for housing or to get small businesses and not-for-profits back open. Nor did we wring our hands about the appropriateness of rebuilding infrastructure or responding to the lack of insurance available for developers. Rather, we attacked each problem as it became apparent. We professionally engaged, we compromised, and we hammered out a plan to address each problem as it arose, and we did it fast. We were tempered in our partisanship. Partisanship is never absent from the public stage, but the degree to which it is the dominant element in the many influences on public policy waxes and wanes. In the days after 9/11, we were able to keep partisanship on a short leash. I remember being in the Oval Office the day after I visited New York with Senators Clinton, and we told President Bush of the damage in New York. And I asked the President, we need $20 billion in New York. We need a pledge immediately without even thinking. The President said yes. New York was a blue state, one that didn't support President Bush. He didn't stop and wait and calculate politically. He said yes. And to his credit, he stuck by that promise in the years to come. We were collaborative, not vituperative. Unlike recent tragedies, like the Fort Hood shooting, where some sought to heap blame upon President Obama, or the Gabby Gifford shooting, where premature blame was mistakenly directed at the right wing for spurring the attacker, which in turn begat an unseemly round of recrimination. Unlike that, following 9/11, people refrained from using the powerful and exploitable event as an opportunity to blame President Bush or President Clinton for letting an attack happen. Rather than looking back and hanging an iron collar of blame around the neck of a president to score political points, people from both parties were willing to look forward, to plan forward, to act forward. This in turn helped create a climate where collaboration was possible. And to his credit, the President, as I mentioned, did not think about the electoral map or political implications of supporting New York. We were bold and decisive. We did not shrink from the big thing, nor fail to act on multiple levels at once. On one front, we crafted the $20 billion aid package to rebuild New York. On another, we crafted the Patriot Act. On still another, the military and intelligence communities planned the invasion of Afghanistan to root out al-Qaeda. These were big moves with massive implications for life, the national coffers, and the structure of our society. None of the moves was perfect. But rather than say derail the for example, derail the $20 billion aid package to New York, because you might think we don't have the money to spend, or blocking the Patriot Act because you believe that it did not do enough to produce civil liberties, in the period after 9/11, those objections were made. Those with objections made a good faith effort to have their points included in the nascent legislation and had some real success, like building in punishments against those who leak information obtained from wiretaps or preventing information from unconstitutional searches from abroad from being used in a legal proceeding. But in the end, on the Patriot Act, for example, Democrats, who were in the minority and could have played the role of blocker, let it pass with a pledge to improve it over time rather than scuttle it entirely. Because while there were parts of that some disagreed with strongly, there were parts that were absolutely necessary. Now compare this to our current stalemate on fiscal policy and the economy, where time after time the my way or highway view seems to prevail, leading to inaction, gridlock, and failure to do what the economy truly needs. We were balanced and fair. On the one hand, we were pragmatic. We made the airlines and owners of the World Trade Center and other potential targets immune from potentially bankrupting lawsuits. It was not an easy decision. It was strenuously opposed by some in the trial bar and other Democratic allies, but it was a reasonable one. And on the other hand, we were just. We created, with billions in financing, the Victims' Compensation Fund, the VCF, so that no victim or their loved one would be denied access to justice. It proved to be a win-win. The crippled airline industry, so critical to our economy, was able to get back and running, and every injured person or loved one of those lost had an expedited and fair system to pursue a claim of loss. This harkened back to the kind of grand bargains on big issues that are the very foundation of effective government and the system of diffused power that we were bequeathed by our founders. The kind of bargains the current state of politics, Mr. President, makes so elusive today. We were short and long-term focused. We were concerned with both short-term support via FEMA aid to homeowners, renters, and small businesses, and with long-term competitiveness. We invested heavily in transportation infrastructure to move millions in and out of the central business districts, even while we supported the arts and community groups, parks, nonprofits, and more, to create a vibrant and growing 24/7 downtown that we have today, a hub that is at the very center of the nation's economy and culture, far from the horrible view we had that downtown would become a ghost town shortly after 9/11. So in short, Mr. President, the response to 9/11 by all Americans, by both parties, is a roadmap for how our political system ought to function, but is not now functioning. I'm not a Pollyanna. I understand the inherent nature of conflict in the political realm, and I often partake in it. And I also know that the trauma of 9/11 was uncommon and made possible uncommon action. Then we had both the shocking murder of thousands of innocent victims, the heroism of the responders to inspire us, and the advantage of a common enemy to unite us. But what we were able to achieve then, in terms of common purpose and effective collective action, provides us with a model for action that we in Washington must strive to emulate, and even if just in part, even if just sporadically, to recreate. We should look back to what happened during 9/11 and apply it to our own time and see how we can make ourselves better and break the kind of gridlock, partisanship, finger-pointing that seems to dominate our politics today, only 10 years later. As we survey the current state of our national psyche and the ability of our political system to debate and then implement effective policy actions for the challenges that confront us, it is painfully clear that in the relative blink of the eye, the ability of our political system to muster the will to take necessary actions for the common good has degenerated to a place that is much too far away from our actions after 9/11. And the question that haunts me, and should haunt all of us, is if God forbid, another 9/11 attack were to happen tomorrow, would our national political system respond with the same unity, non-recrimination, common purpose, and effective policy action in the way that it did just 10 years ago? Or are our politics now so petty, fanatically ideological, polarized, and partisan that we would instead descend into blame and brinksmanship and direct our fire inward and fail to muster the collective will to act in the interests of the American people? As I ponder it, I have every confidence that the first responders, cops, firefighters, and others would do now just as they did then. Their awe-inspiring selflessness and bravery continue to be a humbling wonder and an inspiration. I know our building trades workers would again drop everything and just show up, put their lives on the line, and throw their backs into the task at hand without waiting to be asked. And I am certain that the American people would come together and find countless ways to donate their time, their energy, their ideas, and their compassion to the cause at hand. But what of our political system? I'm an optimist, so I want to believe the answer is yes. But I'm also a realist and a very engaged player on the Washington scene who has just been through the debt ceiling brinksmanship amongst other recent battles. And that realistic part of me is not so sure. The answer is yes. Today, would we still pass a bipartisan $20 billion aid package to the afflicted city? Or would we say that's not my region? Or would we fail to take the long view and say we can't afford to spend lavish sums of money like that? We have to spend within our means. Would we be capable of coming together to pass a grand bargain that immunized the airlines from lawsuits and created the Victims' Compensation Fund? Or instead, would we embrace the politics of asphyxiation and find every excuse to block getting to yes in order to prevent our political opponents from appearing to achieve something positive? Would all parties refrain from using the occasion to place blame on the President and on each other to gain relative political advantage? Or would we hear first the leaked whispers, then the chatter, then the recrimination that build to the ugly echo chamber of vituperation that has been the sad hallmark of more recent tragedies and national security events? This political accord following 9/11 had its limits, especially in the aftermath of our invasion of Iraq, when one key rationale for going to war was discredited. But even for those who came to view our involvement as distracting and wrong, distracting from the more important political objective of rooting out al-Qaeda, and wrong because it could not work, and there was a great loss of life and treasure. Even for those of us who came to abhor the war in Iraq, it would have been unthinkable then to root against our country's eventual success in Iraq. Compare that to now, when it is fathomable that some would rather America not recover its economic strength and prowess just yet. When we think back to where we were then and to how we reacted and compare it to challenges we confront today, it is clear that while the sacrifice of the victims and the heroism of the responders was eternal, our ability to sustain both the common purpose and effective political action they inspired has proved all too ephemeral. I won't recount details of our current dysfunction, but suffice it to say our politics are paralyzed. Domestically, we are frozen in an illogical arm wrestling match between the need to get people back to work and jumpstart the economy and the drive to rein in the deficit. Globally, we're confronted by an uncertain place in an increasingly competitive world. And finally, our challenges are psychological and emotional and aspirational, much like they were in the darkest hours and days after 9/11. And these doubts whisper to us the following question. Are we no longer able to tackle the big issues? Are we a nation in decline? I'm not saying that the challenges we face today are an exact parallel for what we faced then. It's obvious they're not, nor are all conditions the same. But today's challenges, from the economic to the global to the social, are not intractable. And if any one of our current dilemmas were subject to the same policy environment we had post 9/11, I have no doubt we would make substantial progress in tackling it. Confronted with a more profound, complex, and existential challenge on 9/11, we rose to the occasion. We confronted the problem before us with uniquely American doggedness, pragmatism, creativity, collaboration, and optimism. Optimism. Because that's what Americans do, and that's who we are. We believe that no matter how bad it gets, whether hunkered down for the winter in Valley Forge after a series of humiliating military defeats, or arriving like Lincoln in Washington, D.C. in 1860 to find half our nation and next-door neighbor states are attempting to destroy our Union, or FDR confronting in 1932 25% unemployment and an unprecedented deflationary spiral in a modern industrial financial economy, or believing that indeed all people are created equal even while you're rudely ushered to the back of the bus, or facing down totalitarian threats of fascism and communism and believing that, yes, we will tear that wall down. Americans believe in a brighter tomorrow. We believe in our ability as a people, individually and collectively, both through private action and via our elected representatives who make our nation's policy, to get things done to make that brighter tomorrow a reality. We have, as a nation, faced bigger challenges, and we have answered the call, and 9/11 was one shining example. We're in better shape now on many fronts as a result of the actions we took immediately after the aftermath of 9/11. And those are well known: rebuilding New York City, compensating families, flushing al-Qaeda from its base in Afghanistan, leading to the fact that Osama bin Laden is dead. In the Middle East, it is not as we feared after 9/11, the hateful, myopic, reactive philosophy of bin Laden that took hold and changed their societies. Rather, it's imbued with some decent measure of hope and optimism and courage that created a cascading wave of political, social, and economic aspiration that has transformed this region from Tunisia and Libya to Egypt and Syria, aided and abetted by entrepreneurial innovations pioneered here in America. This transformation is not without enormous dangers, challenges, but consider how much worse it would have been if a pro-bin Laden movement was fueling this transformation. It's plain we need more of what we had post 9/11 now. I'm not naive. I know it can't be conjured up or wished into existence. But if we're optimistic, if we're inspired by the Americans who died here, if we truly understand our shared history and the sacred place compromise and rationality hold at the very center of the formation of our nation and the structure of our Constitution, then we can again take up the mantle of shared sacrifice and common purpose that we wore after 9/11 and apply some of those behaviors to the problems we now confront. The reality of our current political climate is that both sides are off in their corners. The common enemy is faded. Some see Wall Street as the enemy. Many others see Washington, D.C. as the enemy, and still others, any and all government as the enemy. I believe the greatest problem we face is the belief that we can no longer confront and solve the problems and challenges that confront us, the fear that our best days may be behind us, that for the first time in history We fear things won't be as good for our kids as they are for us. It is a creeping pessimism that cuts against the will, the can-do and will-do American spirit. And along with the divisiveness in our politics, it is harming our ability to create the great works that our forebears accomplished. Building the Empire State Building in the teeth of the Great Depression, constructing the state highway system in the Hoover Dam and the Erie Canal, and so much more. While government action is not the whole answer to all that faces us, it is equally true we can't confront the multiple and complex challenges we face with no government, or a defanged government, or a dysfunctional government. As we approach the 10th anniversary of 9/11, the focus on what happened that day intensifies what we lost, whom we lost, and how we reacted. It becomes acutely clear that we need to confront our current challenges imbued with the spirit of 9/11 and determined to make our government and our politics worthy of the sacrifice and loss we suffered that day. To return to de Tocqueville, he also remarked that, quote, "The greatness of America lies not in being more enlightened than any other nation, but rather in her ability to repair her faults," unquote. So like the iron workers and operating engineers and trades workers who miraculously appeared at the pile hours after the towers came down with blowtorches and hard hats in hand, let us put on our gloves, pick up our hammers, and get to work fixing what ails the body politic. It is the least we can do to honor those we lost. Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
The senator from Alabama is recognized.
I would ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection, so ordered. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of H.R. 1249, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 87, H.R. 1249, an act to amend Title 35, United States Code to provide for patent reform.
I'd ask the reading of the matter be dispensed with.
Without objection, so ordered.
And that I be asked unanimous consent to call up my amendment number 600, which is at the desk.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Alabama, Mr. Sessions, proposes an amendment numbered 600 on page 149, line 20.
Mr. President, I would ask that the reading of the amendment be dispensed with.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, the amendment that I've offered is a very important amendment. It's one that I believe is important to the integrity of the United States legal system and to the integrity of the United States Senate. It's a matter that I have been wrestling with and objecting to for over a decade. I thought the matter had been settled, frankly, but it has not, because it has been driven by one of the most ferocious lobbying efforts that Congress maybe has seen. The House patent bill, as originally passed out of committee and taken to the floor of the House, did not include a bailout for Medco, the WilmerHale law firm, or the insurance carrier for that firm, who were in financial jeopardy as a result of a failure to file a patent appeal timely. I have practiced law hard in my life. I have been in court many times. I spent 12 years as a United States attorney and tried cases. I'm well aware of how the system works. The system throughout America is you file lawsuits and you're entitled to your day in court. But if you don't file your lawsuit in time, within the statute of limitations, the limitations on actions that require you to timely file your litigation, you are out. When a defendant raises a legal point of order, a motion to dismiss based on the failure of the complaining party to file their lawsuit timely, they are out. That happens every day to poor people, widow ladies. And that make any difference what your excuse is, why you think you have a good lawsuit, why you had this idea or that idea. In Alabama, they had a situation in which a lady asked a probate judge when she could file her appeal, and the judge said, you can file it on Monday, and Monday was too late. They went to the Alabama Supreme Court, and they said, the probate judge, who doesn't have to be a lawyer, doesn't have the power to amend the statute of limitations. Sorry, lady, you're out. Nobody filed a bill in the United States Congress to give her relief, and thousands of others like it every day. So it's a big deal. To whom much has been given, much is required. So this was a big-time law firm, one of the biggest law firms in America, Medco, one of the biggest health care companies in the country, and presumably they have an insurance errors and omission carrier, the law firm does, that they pay to insure them if they make an error. And so they've not being willing to accept that. So one time an individual was asking me, oh, Jeff, you let this go. Give in and let this go. And I sort of, as a joke, said to the individual, well, if Wilma Hale will agree not to raise the statute of limitations against anybody that sues their clients if they file a lawsuit late, maybe I'll reconsider. He thought I was serious. Of course, Wilma Hale is not going to do that. If some poor person files a lawsuit against somebody they're representing and they file it 1 hour late, Wilma Hale will file a motion to dismiss it. And they don't ask why they filed it late. This is law. It has to be objective. It has to be fair. You're not entitled to waltz into the United States Congress well-connected and start lobbying for special relief. And there's nothing more complicated about that than this. So a couple of things have been raised. Well, they suggest that we shouldn't amend the House patent bill, that somehow will kill the legislation. That is not so. I know the chairman, Leahy, has said, well, he supports the amendment, but he doesn't want to vote for it because it would keep the bill from being passed somehow. It won't keep it from being passed. Indeed, the bill that was brought to the House floor didn't have this language in it. And the first vote rejected the attempt to put this language in it. It failed. And for some reason, some way, a second vote was held and it was passed by a few votes. So they're not going to reject the legislation if we were to amend it. And what kind of system are we now involved in the United States Senate if you can't do an amendment? What kind of argument is to say, Jeff, I agree with your amendment. I think it's right. I don't think they ought to get this special relief, but I can't vote for it because it might cause a problem. It's not going to cause a problem. The bill will pass. It should never have been put in there in the first place. And another point of great significance is the fact that this legislation, this issue, is on appeal. The law firm asserted that they thought, it's a bit unusual, but they thought that because the notice came in late Friday, they had till Monday, which isn't. They could count the days into Monday somehow, the 60 days or whatever they had to file the answer. Well, I don't know that that's good law, but they won. The district court has ruled for them, and it's on appeal now to the Court of Appeals. This Congress has no business interfering in a lawsuit ongoing that's before an appeals court. If they're so confident that their district court ruling is correct, why are they continuing to push for this special relief bill when the Court of Appeals will soon, within a matter of months, I assume, rule? Another point. We have in the United States Congress a procedure to deal with special relief. If this relief is necessary at all, it should go through the special relief bill. But I can tell you one reason it's not going there now, because you can't ask for special relief while your matter is still in litigation and it's still in appeal. Special relief also has procedures that you have to go through and justify in an objective way that I believe would be very healthy under this situation. So for a decade, virtually, I think it's been 10 years, I have been objecting to this amendment. And now we're here, and I thought it was out, and all of a sudden it slipped in by a second vote in the House, and we're told, well, we just can't make an amendment to the bill. Why can't we make an amendment? The Senate's set up for legislation to be brought forward, and we offer amendments, and people can vote for them or not. Well, this matter has gotten a lot of attention. The Wall Street Journal wrote about it in an editorial yesterday. The New York Times today. This is what the New York Times said today about it. Critics who have labeled this provision the Dog Ate My Homework Act say it's really a special fix for one drug manufacturer, the Medicines Company, and its powerful law firm, WilmerHale. The company and its law firm, with hundreds of millions of dollars in drug sales at stake, lobbied Congress heavily for years to get the patent laws changed. That's the way they said it. The Wall Street Journal, in their editorial, the Wall Street Journal is understands business reality, litigation reality. They're a critic of the legal system at times and supporters at times. I think they take a principled position in this instance. The Wall Street Journal editorial stated, quote, "We take no pleasure in seeing the Medicines Company and WilmerHale suffer for their mistake, but they are run by highly paid professionals who know the rules and know that consistency of enforcement is critical to their businesses. Asking Congress to break the rules as a special favor corrupts the law," close quote. So I think that's exactly right. It's exactly right. Businesses, when they're sued by somebody, they use the statute of limitations every day. This law firm makes hundreds of millions of dollars in income a year. Their partners average over $1 million a year, according to the New York Times. Pretty good. They ought to be able to pay a decent errors and omissions insurance premium. The New York Times today said that WilmerHale reported revenue of $962 million in 2010 with a profit of $1.33 million per partner. 1 year per partner profit. So, average guys have to suffer when they miss the statute of limitations. Poor people suffer when they miss the statute of limitations. But we're undertaking at great expense to the taxpayers to move a special interest piece of legislation that I don't believe can be justified as a matter of principle. And I agree with the Wall Street Journal that the adoption of it corrupts the system. And we ought not to be a part of that. I love the American legal system. It is the greatest system I know. I've seen judges time and time and time again issue rulings based on law and fact, even if they didn't like it, but if that's what the law said, they ruled on them. That's the genius, the reliability, the integrity of the American legal system. And I just do not believe that we can justify, while this matter is still in litigation, passing a special act to give a wealthy law firm, an insurance company, and a health care company special relief. I just don't believe we should do that, and I oppose it, and I hope my colleagues will join us. I think we have a realistic chance to turn this back, and our Congress, our Senate, will be better for it. We really will. Citizens Against Government Waste, who have taken an interest in this matter for some time, said, quote, "Congress has no right to rescue a company from its own mistakes." See, companies have a right to assert the law. Corporations have a right to assert the law against individuals. But when the time comes for the hammer to fall on them for their mistake, they want Congress to pass out a special relief bill. And I don't think it's the right thing. So, Mr. President, let's boil it down to several things. First, if the company is right and the law firm is right that they did not miss the statute of limitations, I am confident the Court of Appeals will rule in their favor, and it will not be necessary for this Senate to act. If they do not prevail in the Court of Appeals and they don't win their argument, then there is a provision for private relief in the United States Congress, and they ought to pursue that. And it has special procedures. Litigation will be over, and they can bring that action at that time. That's the basic position we ought to be in, and a bill that comes out of the Judiciary Committee ought to be sensitive to the legal system, to the importance of ensuring that the poor are treated as well as the rich. You know, the oath that judges take to do equal justice to the poor and the rich. Equal justice. How many other people in this country are getting special attention today on the floor of the United States Senate? How many are? I truly believe that this is not good. It's not good policy. I have had to spend far more hours than I've ever wanted to when I decided 10 years ago that this was not a good way to go forward. Many battle this issue, and I hope and trust that the members of the Senate who will be voting on this, I urge you to follow the legitimate processes. Let the litigation work its way. And if they do not prevail in the litigation, let a private relief bill be sought and debated openly and publicly, and to see if it's justified. That would be the right way to do it, not slipping through this amendment on the basis that we shouldn't be amending a bill that's before us. We have every right to amend the bill, and we should amend the bill. I know Senator Grassley years ago was on my side. I think it was just two of us that took this position. So so what I feel about it, I guess I more than expressed my opinion. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your and Senator Grassley's great work on an important patent bill. I support that bill, and I believe you moved it forward in a fair way. You did not put this language into the bill. It was put in the House, and I know you'd like to see the bill go forward and without amendments, but I urge you to think it through and see if you can't be willing to support this amendment. I'm confident it will not block the final passage of the legislation. Mr. President, I thank the Chair and would yield the floor.
Mr. President, the senior senator from Vermont is recognized.
President, I have 7 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate that approve the majority of minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent. This request be agreed to and the request be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I will speak later about the comments made by the distinguished senator from Alabama, and he has been very helpful in getting this patent bill through, and he is correct that this amendment he speaks to is one added in the other body, not by us. I purposely did not have it in our bill, but I know Senator Grassley is going to follow my remarks that I'm going to make about Vermont. But there is no question in my mind, and I'll let Senator Grassley speak to this, if the amendment to the senator from Alabama was accepted, it in effect kills the bill. It kills the bill. irrespective of the merits, come up on another piece of legislation, come up with freestanding legislation, that's fine. But on this bill, after 6 years of effort to get this far, this bill would die because the other body will not take it up again with that. Now, Mr. President, and using my time, I would note some of the things that are happening in my own very, very special state of Vermont, the state in which I was born. We have been horribly impacted by Irene, with disaster and damage greater than anything I've seen in my whole lifetime. And as Vermonters come together and continue to grapple with the aftermath of storm damage from Irene, I want to focus today on the agricultural disaster that's hit us in Vermont and report to the Senate and our fellow citizens across the nation about how the raging floodwaters wreaked havoc on our farming lands and infrastructure in Vermont. It was 12 days ago now that this enormous, slow-moving storm hit Vermont. It turned our calm, scenic brooks and creeks into raging gushers. In addition to our roads and historic covered bridges that were destroyed or carried away, we had barns and farmhouses and crops, parts of fields, livestock washed away in the rising floodwaters. The comments of one farmer watched his herd of cows get washed down the river, knowing they were going to die in the floodwaters. Now, the cameras have begun to turn away. The cleanup and urgent repairs are underway. For major parts of Vermont's economy, the worst effects of the storm are yet to come. For our dairy farmers, who are bedrock of our economy, keystones of our communities, the toll of this disaster has been heavy, and the crisis has lasted longer as they struggle to take care of their animals when the floodwaters recede. This is a photograph of East Pittsford, Vermont. The water you see is never there. It's there now. Look at this farm's fields destroyed. Look at homes damaged, and think what that's done. When asked, maybe put that up on the easel behind me. As I went around the state, as all of us in the congressional delegation have, I went around with our governor and our adjutant general. First couple of days after the flood, the only way we could go to many of these places by helicopter. I can't tell you how much it tore at my heart to see this state that birthplace to me, my parents, grandparents, and to see roads turn out, bridges that were there when my parents were children, survived everything they had washed away. Historic covered bridges, mills, barns, businesses just gone. And what it's done to our farmers, it's hard, I can't overstate it. Our farmers have barns that are completely gone, leaving no shelter for animals. They're left struggling to get water for their animals, to rebuild fencing, clean up debris from flooded fields and barns, and then to get milk trucks to dairy farms. Remember, these cows have to be milked every single day. We also have farmers who don't have any feed or hay for their animals. Why? It was all washed away. Well, as one farmer told me, my cows need to be milked 2 or 3 times every day, come hell or high water. This farmer thought he'd been hit with both hell and high water. While reports are still coming in from the farms that were affected, the list of damages, the need for critical supplies such as feed, generators, fuel, temporary fencing, is on the rise. As we survey the farm fields and communities, we know it will be difficult to calculate the economic impacts of this violent storm on our agriculture industry in Vermont. Many of our farmers were caught by surprise as rapidly rising, unprecedented rapidly rising floodwaters inundated their crops, and many had to deal with the deeply emotional experience of losing animals to fast-moving floodwaters. We have farms where whole fields were washed away and the fertile topsoil sent rushing downriver. The timing could not have been worse. Corn, which is a crucial winter feed for dairy cows, was just ready for harvest. Now our best corn is in river bottoms. It's ruined. Other farmers have just prepared their ground to sow winter cover crops and winter greens, and they lost significant amounts of topsoil. The distinguished ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, my friend from Iowa, knows what floods can do to a farmer, and what it can do to the topsoil, and what it can do to crops that are just about ready to be harvested. Riverbanks gave way. We saw wide field buffers disappear overnight, leaving the crops literally hanging on ledges above rivers. Is at the Kingsbury Farm in Warren, Vermont. Vegetable farming is Vermont's fastest-growing agriculture sector. And, of course, this is harvest season. Well, the farmers weren't able to pick these crops. The storm picked many fields clean. And so many Vermonters have highly productive gardens that they depend upon for their families to get through the winter by canning and freezing. Those too have been washed away. Or if they're still there, they are considered dangerous for human consumption because of contaminated floodwaters. Vermont farmers have a challenging and precarious future ahead of them as they look to rebuild and plan for next year's crops, and knowing that in our state it can be snowing in a month and a half to 2 months. Now, I've been heartened by the many stories I've heard from communities where people are coming together to help one another. For instance, at the Intervale Community Farm on the Winooski River, volunteers came out to harvest the remaining dry fields before the produce was hit by still rising floodwaters. When the rumors spread that Beth and Bob Kennett at Liberty Hill Farm in Rochester had no power and they needed help milking, well, people just started showing up by foot, on bike, all-terrain vehicle. They just showed up and said, we're here to help you milk. Fortunately for them and for the poor cows, the Vermont Department of Agriculture managed to help get them fuel, and the Kennets were milking again. So they asked these volunteers who came to help them, go down the road, help somebody else. And they did. Now, coping with damage and destruction on this scale is beyond the means and capabilities of a small state such as ours. And federal help with the rebuilding effort would be essential to Vermont, as it will be to other states coping with the same disaster. And I worry that the support they need to rebuild may not be there, as it has been in past disasters, when we have rebuilt after hurricanes and floods, fires and earthquakes to get Americans back in their homes, something Vermonters have supported, even though in these past disasters Vermont was not touched. So I look forward to working with the Appropriations Committee and with all senators to ensure that FEMA and USDA and all of our federal agencies have the resources they need to help all of our citizens at this time of disaster, in Vermont and in all the other states hit. Unfortunately, programs like the Emergency Conservation Program, the Emergency Watershed Protect Program, have been oversubscribed this year, and USDA has only limited funds remaining. We also face the grim fact that few of our farms had bought crop insurance. And so it may not be covered by USDA's current SURE, S-U-R-E, disaster program. But those are things I'm working on to help find ways to help our farmers as we move forward with a commitment to help our fellow Americans. You know, for a decade, Mr. President, we have spent billions every single week on wars and projects in faraway lands. Well, this is a time to start paying more attention to our needs here at home, to the needs of Americans in America, the urgent needs of our fellow citizens. We can do it. I believe we will. We can't sit here and just talk. We have to do it now. Mr. President, I see my friend from Iowa on the floor, and I yield the floor.